Hello everyone and welcome to another game I played on Ptcgo. I know there's been a gap between my last upload. I've just been quite a bit busy and haven't had a time to upload. But this time I'm going to be playing an Aegislash deck. So I'm going to start off with Victini, which you just use to accelerate energy since Aegislash takes 4 energies to attack. So my opponent's going to start off with Entei and attach a fire energy. Not really sure what type of deck he's going to be playing, since Entei is not really common, but we see a Skyla for a level ball. So the strategy of this deck is just to repeatedly use Aegislash's attack King's Shield. It does 50 damage and it prevents all damage done to Aegislash on your opponent's turn, but Aegislash cannot use that attack the next turn, so you do a few little things to get around that. My opponent searches for a Fennekin and then a white Kyurem. So quite unusual, I don't know, but it looks like not a super competitive deck, which I'm very happy to see just because this deck itself, Aegislash, is very much not competitive. I wouldn't recommend anyone play it, as you'll see in this match you can end up really getting yourself stuck because the reliance on switching out every turn. So I'm going to Ultra Ball here for a Honedge and then play an N. Get another Honedge. I am going to attach a DCE to Honedge. I don't really have any way to use Victini right now, so just to give that up. So my opponent is going to evolve into Braxton, or however you say that. He attaches a second fire onto Entei, and then we see a second Skyla here. So I see the point of Braxton, but I don't really see why you would partner it up with these cards in particular, since I really don't know. But then we see a Tepeg, so I guess that makes a little bit more sense. Provide energy acceleration and a consistent draw. My opponent will attack me here, hitting me for 30, and it looks like I get burned, so that is not good. I am going to evolve into a Doublade. I will attach a metal energy onto that Doublade, a muscle band, and then I will chorus for 5. I do fortunately manage to get a Keldeo here, so I can rush in with and attach a floatstone to it to get out of that burn condition. And this is sort of the card that makes the deck all work. You rush in and retreat, not only to get out of status elements, but with this you can repeatedly attack with Aegislash each turn. So finally we see Delphox come out and a Tepig evolves, or I think he attaches an energy. I'm not really sure due to the animation, but actually he attaches an energy onto Entei, and then he's going to use Mystical Fire to draw up to 6 cards in his hand, or draw until he has 6. So it's quite a good draw supporter, or draw Pokemon. And he's going to hit Keldeo for 90. Unfortunately here my hand is pretty much dead, so I have the choice of leaving Keldeo in the active or sacrificing something else. I'm going to retreat into Honedge. I figure it's okay for him to knock it out, and I'll attach another metal energy onto my bench Doublade, getting it ready to attack if I can evolve into Aegislash. And now, unfortunately, my opponent has Emoboar, so he might be able to take multiple prizes if I can't get this deck off the ground. But then we see an Ultra Ball here, discarding a water energy in the process for another Kyurem here. So none of these are the, I guess, Kyurems that are super playable, but interesting nonetheless. Then we see a Shauna get played, and my opponent draws 5 cards. So here, if my opponent plays some form of switching card, I'm in trouble, since he may be able to take 2 prizes here, or knock out my Honedge. So instead he just knocks out Honedge, sorry. I will send up Victini into the active, and I'm fortunate enough to top deck that Juniper. So here I'm debating whether or not to attach. I guess I'm going to attach that DCE onto Keldeo in case it needs to attack. His Pokemon are weak to water, so that's kind of a good thing here. And I finally get Aegislash here, so now I can start with some shenanigans here. I will level ball For Honedge, I unfortunately only have one left in the deck, since one did get just knocked out, because it's important to have two in case one gets knocked out somehow. I'm going to rush in and then retreat into Aegislash, and here I'm going to start with King's Shield and doing 70 damage thanks to Muscle Band. And here you'll see just how slow and ineffective this deck can be. So at this rate I need to hit my opponent 3 times to knock Entei out, and Crystal Edge gets played right now into White Kyurem. He's going to use Inferno Fandango to power up White Kyurem, and looks like you guys can probably see the problem here. So since he can accelerate energy, he can just retreat and swap out those big EXs for each other, and I won't be able to take a prize if he can keep the strategy up long enough. But if he keeps on using Mystical Fire, I may be able to just deck him out. But a win is very unlikely any other way for me. I'm going to play here a Professor's Letter, getting myself 2 metal energies. I don't have that many metal or energies period in the deck. I will play an N, and here I get a second Keldeo. I'm going to bench it, use a Floatstone, and I will rush in to be able to use King's Shield again. Going back into Honedge, or sorry, Aegislash, and hitting Entei for 70. So now my opponent, if he leaves Entei in the active, I can take a knockout, but that would be shocking if he did. We do see a Prism Energy go onto White Kyurem, and he retreats into this. So he can't hit me for damage, but he can attack, and he does. And unfortunately, I don't really know why he did it, since it forces him to discard energy. So it's kind of a silly move on his part. Now, here I'm going to rush in again and retreat. He also, I think, triggered a status ailment there. And here I will King's Shield his White Kyurem for 70. And I guess here's where I'm sort of realizing if I had room, this deck could really use Laser or something of that nature to just beef up the damage, because it's very ineffective. We see my opponent now go for a Skyla. He really just needs a way to, if he can remove the tools, to slow me down. So if he plays a Tool Scrapper, he should go for that, but he instead goes for a Chorus. So that's good news for me, because it suggests he doesn't play Tool Scrapper. Otherwise, that would have been the card to play right now. But he's going to Inferno Fandango, this time attaching to his Black Kyurem, it looks like, that's on the bench. He attaches 4 fire energy. So I'm not even sure if that meets any of its attacks. Maybe its first one. And then we see a Mystical Fire again. So this is sort of good for me, as I mentioned earlier. It really just forces my opponent to draw cards and really achieve nothing. And now my opponent is actually going to retreat, discarding even more energy to send up Black Kyurem, and again dealing no damage. So here my opponent is going through a lot of resources and accomplishing nothing. Meanwhile, on my end, I've barely dented his side of the field. So I'm going to evolve into another Aegislash. We'll rush in to begin to repeat this maddening process, so I can King Shield once again for 70 damage. Yeah, so 3 hit KOs are really bad with this type of deck. And now my opponent once again is going to manually retreat. But this time he's going to send up Latias, and because of its Bright Down ability, I can't actually attack it since I have an ability. So that's kind of bad. And then my opponent energy searches for a water and a fire, and we're going to see him start to power up White Kyurem once more. So Latias will buy him time, and here it'll force me to pick a different attacker. So I can attack with Victini, actually. That's the only thing on my side of the field that doesn't have an ability. My opponent plays down a Professor's Letter, attaching even more energy onto White Kyurem. But the big thing here is, does he have enough energy to attach with Latias? Because that's really the thing he should be powering up. I know he discarded his Prism energies, so I don't know how many more he plays. We see another Mystical Fire and another Energy Search be played here. Or, sorry, an Energy Retrieval. And more fire energy comes down on the field. This time he's attaching to Latias, but I think its attack requires a Psychic as well. So he's going to need to draw into those prisms. And then we see a Chorus for 10. So now my opponent is down to 5 cards in his deck. So he's running through it very quickly, which I'm excited to see. Here I'm going to Skyla to see what my options are. I do have Victory Piece in the deck. I will get that because it'll give me the option to pressure my opponent. I may not want to attack with Victini since he can get the return knockout right away if I can knock out Latias, but it does sort of let my opponent know that, hey, I've got you cornered. I'm one step ahead of you, and even if you think you can knock out one thing, I will have something waiting in the wings to get the return knockout. So now my opponent is going to attach to Black Kyurem, and I just sort of rushed in with Aegislash and use its attack. Even though it does nothing, it still prevents the effects from his attacks. So 0 damage, but I think it still was a smarter, conservative play here. Now, I do have escape ropes here, which I will play, but first I'm going to rush in, then escape ropes, hoping he sends out something I can potentially knock out. And he sends up White Kyurem, and I will send up Victini here. I will use Intensifying Burn. I'll be able to hit for 100, but that unfortunately isn't enough for the knockout, I realize. So here I'm going to go back to the drawing board and just rush in again with my second Keldeo, and this time go back into Aegislash just to hit for 70. So again, playing it conservatively because I don't really have another choice. And now my opponent here, if he doesn't retreat, I can get the knockout on White Kyurem on his next turn, but that's a big if. He has manually retreated before, and it looks like he's going to do it again, once again promoting his Latias. And I'd like to point out here that my opponent's down to 3 cards. He's playing a Skyla, failing it, and in this whole game, only 1 prize card has been taken by either side, and that was pretty early on in the game. So, I don't know, I found this amusing. Here I'm going to play another escape rope, hoping he sends something I can knock out. And this time it's going to be Delphox. Unfortunately, I can't knock that out, but I will send up Keldeo just so I can retreat and once again use King's Shield for 70 damage. And now my opponent is going to deck out soon. He has essentially, if he doesn't play N, he has 2 cards left in his deck, and I think his hand size is kind of large, and so he's going to concede actually. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that really messy game.